Mary. I am one of the career coaches here at SOM. Thank you today for joining us for how to effectively use AI in your job search. I'm really excited to go through this presentation and share some information that we found very helpful in our job search. So with that, I want to go ahead and get started. I know we are in webinar mode, but I want to get a little bit of understanding of what your exposure to AI is. So there's a poll on the screen, so we can try to figure out, see lots of fluctuations actually. Some folks are, I don't know. So nobody feels like an expert. I'll be honest, I'm doing this and I don't feel like an expert either. So same. Share the results we have so far. So you can see, I think we're all over the place. Everybody feels like we know a little bit, a fair amount. I'm going to also say, like, I feel like I am still learning, but I think at the rate at which AI is evolving, we're all still learning technically. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So understanding AI in your job search, right? So because we all know a little bit about it, I'm just going to kind of gloss over what it is. It refers to, of course, machine learning and its capability to do tasks. Today, we're going to specifically talk about one type of machine learning of AI, which is generative AI, and I'm going to get into what that means. But the truth of the matter is AI has been being used for a very long time, right? Our employers have been using it to do a number of things on the recruiting side, and there's some positives and some negatives associated with that. You probably have already, kind of encountered a few of those, and we'll start to talk about that. The benefits, though, I think the upside is great as long as we make sure that we are mitigating the risk in terms of bias and all of those kinds of things. But for job seekers specifically, for you, it's saving time, right? It may be helping you identify relevant roles that fit your skills and abilities. It could also, of course, on the flip side of that, help employers choose you. And we'll talk about how some of those work. And then we'll also talk about more specifically the AI chatbots. Resume screen reviews. So we talk about like how the applicant tracking system kind of reviews on your submission and then provides a score to that. And I'll give you some anecdotal information about when I was a recruiter. And then maybe talk a little bit more about some types of AI that you might want to use in this particular process, right? So like I said, we want to talk about generative AI. Generative AI is essentially an artificial intelligence technology that scans a data set and then provides back context in terms of imagery, text, and may synthesize that data. It also may do some audio. In the beginning, when ChatGPT was originally released, it was focused more so on a specific data set. Now it is much wider. I think we can thank the advent of Microsoft's Bard for making it a little more the data set a little wider, and that it introduced its ability to sort of scan the net and draw back and make or sort of generate the text and things that happen. So in this case, it might be considered maybe a little bit more of a strong in a general AI, but it's really, really helpful to understand that it's not like, some of the AI that we might think about initially. So let's talk about a little bit how we can use the different search tools for AI in your job search, right? So there are, of course, online job boards that have AI components to them where they may recommend roles for you. So this one, like you think of like LinkedIn or Glassdoor, it literally will then scan some of the skills you have and then start to suggest things for you. I don't know that Glassdoor's AI works that well, but I can say that I do think that LinkedIn has made wonderful strides in how their AI comes back and like generates more opportunities for those matches to exist. There's, of course, JobScan and ZipRecruiter. Those actually scan your resume sort of like the applicant tracking system works. So for instance, the last applicant tracking system that I worked in, was called JobVite. JobVite will, when you go to upload, create the account, upload your resume, it literally will scan your resume as it relates to the job description that you've applied for. And then it doesn't necessarily give it a score. JobVite actually, oddly enough, gave it a flame. And so if you are scanning and reviewing thousands of resumes, right? You want to use a little bit more of the tool to help you out. And in this case, that flame would tell you who matched. But really, at that point, it is more of a word match. And so you'll see the JobScan and ZipRecruiter will allow you to do that from the other side. And it is really helpful. The other thing that I want to note is when that scan is happening, it's not only scanning in some applicant tracking systems against the job description that's there, it's also scanning against other job descriptions that may exist inside of the entire system. So JobVite, for instance, has two different lists of candidates, so to speak. It's the candidates that applied for the role, and then there would be a secondary list. So if you have ever applied to another role in that particular, ecosystem, or if you, for instance, have maybe uploaded a version of your resume that also maybe gone into a talent community, you'll appear on a secondary list of maybe things that you may not have applied for, but that word match kind of brings you to that particular job description. So when you are crafting your resume, you want to make sure that honestly you are not only looking at your job description, but maybe looking at some of the other job descriptions there as well to try to pick up as many of the different types of words that your target company may find useful. So just to give you a way to not sort of game the system, but really use that match to your advantage. Then there are also chatbots. Chatbots are actually some of the things that we're going to get into a little later today and show you how you can interface with a chatbot to improve lots of different things as a part of this particular search. So for instance, Maya is a chatbot, ChatGPT is a chatbot, Perplexity is a chatbot. Those are the ones that are scanning, the internet to generate information as you provide questions and ask it different things that you may help from your end. There could also be AI related chatbots on the employer site as well, where you could ask it for specific sections of the website, and it'll bring you more information and help you get to where you're going. There's also a chatbot that I was reading about, I think it launched in March, that is literally a career designated chatbot, which I think is really interesting, where they've programmed the AI to provide specific answers to questions and things like that. I think it, of course, involves a lot more programming than I am privy to, but I'm definitely interested to see once it fully launches, how well it serves in the sort of the place of a human, because that's what it's supposed to be simulating, a career coach conversation. There are also AI capabilities inside of the interview process now. You may have gone to, a process in a bigger company and where you have been interviewing. So like a hire interview, a hire view, a big interview are different companies that utilize AI as a way of helping to evaluate their applicants. And so you would likely have been sent a link. It is called an asynchronous interview platform, and in which case they'll ask you a question. There'll be somebody who appears on the screen, and then once that question goes, they'll give you a time and you'll be able to record your answer. There is also an AI component that is working along with that. It could be scoring your answers, your facial expressions, whether you're smiling, whether you've maintained eye contact, right, with the viewfinder there. It could also be recording your vocal pauses and then providing feedback for the person who is evaluating you in order to move forward. And so likely you have been in contact with a number of different AI capabilities and maybe not have realized that, it has actually been scoring you and being a part of your process all along. Right? So let's talk a little bit about the job search tools, because I want to get into how you can effectively use a number of the different tools that are there. You'll see we'll talk specifically, like I said, we'll run through some different prompts for, I guess I should call them, for ChatGPT. Then we'll talk about the different ones. Big Interview is one of those asynchronous sites. There's GPT-0 and VMOC. Some of those are to help you with your interviewing. So for instance, Interview Warmup is Google's new tool. What it does is it's basically listening to you. It transcribes, sorry, your response, and then based on that will give you feedback on how well you actually went through the interview process. And so that's free to use. Feel free to definitely use that along the way when you are trying to prepare for your next opportunity. Then there's Perplexity. I think Perplexity is a little bit different in its chatbot feature in that it will actually give you citations. I did see that ChatGPT has adopted that as well. But Perplexity, I think maybe you can use this more on the research side of what you were doing. If you wanted to maybe research the industries and maybe the different trends that are happening and those kinds of things, it might give you a better sense of like what's going on because you can see exactly where they pulled that information. I've tried it a few times. It actually is kind of cool to see how they will give you a list of things, and as you click off, the more information about where that information comes from, it will bring you to specific articles so you can then understand if the information is sourced from what you would deem a trustworthy site. Um, but there are lots of different opportunities, I think, for you to use these job search tools to your advantage. So let's talk about how you might leverage it for your resume and cover letter development, right? So the resume is, of course, sometimes the most painstaking things that people have to do. Oftentimes, when you read a job description, you will feel compelled, right, to tailor it a little bit. And I think the reason why I like generative AI for this is because it saves lots of time. You could actually put, copy, cut, paste the entire job description, your entire resume into it, and it can then show you ways that you can optimize and tailor your resume to that specific request. Now, it is not absolutely foolproof. There will be opportunities, and I think that you should take them to make sure you go through and really adjust some of that information. It is not, how shall I say it? I don't think it's necessarily maybe at the point that we'd like it to be. It is also still learning, and so you want to make sure you're tailing it for a number of different reasons, right? Plagiarism and those kinds of things, but you can actually pull that in there and do that. ChatGPT is actually really good at this. I've played with this now probably for about a year. Maybe I started a little before that, trying to see how it could, optimize it. And it really does depend on the prompt that you give it, meaning, there are specific things that you should say to it in order for it to help you out. What it can also do is it can scan your resume, right? And for instance, detect the key phrases or maybe the soft skills you might want to highlight in the interview process. I think that can be really beneficial for a lot of job seekers sometimes, especially if you feel like, you've been working in the same place for a while and you don't maybe have a handle on all the things that maybe you do well, but it kind of brings things back and brings them up for you so you can understand, where those best things would maybe highlight for the recruiter. The other way that you can use ChatGPT is also, or generative AI, honestly, in general, is leveraging it for behavioral interviews. So one of the things that I like to do and like to teach students to do is to take the job description, you want to put it inside of the system, and you want to make sure you're asking it a few questions, right? You say, I'm going to share some information with you. Here's the job description that I would like you to review. Based on this description, what behavioral questions, right, could you expect inside of an interview? And it will definitely kind of plot them out for you. It will probably give you about, I don't know, 10 to 12 questions. I Originally, ChatGPT was doing the 10 to 12 questions, and in at the outside, it was giving the actual skill, like in parentheses at the end. So that also can help you out with like the skill development, right? You know that in this particular job, you will likely be set with a few things that go, okay, I'm going to need to understand, collaboration, this sort of technology. There's going to be analyzation that needs to be involved. And they'll start asking you those different questions, and they will, of course, then pinpoint those skills. One of the things that also becomes easy, and I'm going to show you how it actually works later, is that you can start off with those questions, build, different responses to them, and then ask them too, how could I enhance this response, or what would be, some good examples from my career to do this if you also have given it your resume. And you can also use it to conduct industry research, like I said, or any sort of brand research. It provides a number of wonderful information to come back to. The one thing though that I want to point out is, as you are doing this, right, is working on that limited data set across the internet. You want to also be sure though that the information is correct. As you know, anybody can create a website. And so if it's scanning across the web for information, it could pick up something that may not necessarily be accurate. I definitely would encourage you to take the information that you receive and then go and vet that information on your own. It's part of the reason why I like Perplexity for the research piece. Like I said, that it gives you the source that the information is coming from. So you want to really be careful about how you are using it. In ChatGPT specifically, it'll tell you kind of at the bottom on the side that, some of the information may not be accurate. So you just want to be mindful of that, because there are some challenges. So let me talk about a little bit more about some of the challenges, right? Some of the other challenges that you might face, like I said, from the other side, is that employer bias, that AI sort of picks up the biases of the people who've created it, right? And so if it is scanning the different types of information that already exists out there, there could be, say, an emphasis on certain types of candidates for this or that. And just like I said, certain types of emphasis for information that it's pulling. And so you want to be careful that when you are on, using this particular technology, that you are also educating yourself around these things and verifying and double checking as well. So there are a number of ethical concerns, right, that we would have to think about, whether it be unconscious bias and the things that it's picking up, like I said, in the hiring process. It might be privacy concerns. One of the things that you want to be mindful of is if you have cut, copy, paste information into this particular thing, that you are not giving it so much of your personal information. So for instance, you don't necessarily have to take the top part of your resume and put it in there. Really take the bottom pieces, where it talks about your skills and highlights, maybe the statement where we're talking about your skills or the exact work experience, you can put that in there. But I would caution you not to like put your name and your address in there, although your address should not be on your resume at all, as an aside. But you want to make sure that you are not sharing things with it from a privacy concern that you would not necessarily. Um, the other thing that I want you to consider as well is thinking about it from a transparency standpoint, right? Um, you want to understand, like I said, like how applicant tracking systems work, how maybe higher view and big interview work, and make those adjustments, because it could be, of course, influencing selection if for some reason there are things you'd like for the recruiters to consider. It might be a good idea to start to familiarize yourself with these platforms, have conversations with recruiters, so then this way you can kind of adapt or adjust your interview process or your job seeking process. The last one to consider is plagiarism. While it is generative and it is giving you back text, when you are going in and you're putting in your resume and asking it for feedback, it's not a good idea to just cut, copy, paste the entire, um, you know, generated information. The best way I think to do it is to really take what it's giving you and adapt that, right? So one thing that you may realize, and you'll see when we do it, is that it's not going to possibly give you all of, kind of like what you are what you're looking for, simply because a lot of the time when you're doing your resume, you want to make sure that you are quantifying, and the output when it comes back likely is not going to provide, there was, a 50% or 20% increase in revenue. You're going to have to adapt the the generation a little bit simply because you want to make sure that you're still providing resume bullets that give the right amount of impact, right? And the reason why the plagiarism thing comes up, especially in terms of the cover letter and the resume, is because traditionally the cover letter was something that, and your resume was something that they could decide, your level of communication based on those. And so if you are just cut, copying, pasting the things that you're getting back, you're not giving them a real idea of your capabilities. And then therefore it's sort of playing into, the integrity and originality of what you were doing. Um, so let's talk a little bit about the prompts, right? There are a number of prompts that you can put in. And honestly, people are releasing prompt lists all the time, right? What I like to do is to start off here um, and, start to say, I'm going to ask it a series of questions and those kinds of things. So what I'd like to do now is I'm going to stop sharing for a second for this particular piece and go to ChatGPT so we can see what it's like in real time. Okay, so I uploaded a resume, of course, into ChatGPT. And we can ask it to, for instance, we can ask it things like, what's the most useful thing you can do to strategize, right? For a job interview. Oops. Description. Now we're going to give it the job interview really quickly. Description. Well, you'll see, it'll start prompting things pretty quickly. It gives a comprehensive overview of the resume. Here's an example of what it is asking you to do, right? So for effective strategies, it gives back things pretty quickly, right? Right. And so you can see here that it'll give you some quick, you can do these things, describes different things here, understand the job requirements, tells you where to focus, align the values, demonstrate business acumen here. So it starts to pull different things out. You can ask it, what are the behavioral questions? So you'll see it starts to give you possible interview questions. It tells you which skills, right, that we map them from, and that can help you, kind of get prepared. If you told it, and then it tells you a little bit of something about the STAR technique. Now you can ask it, of course, more questions. You can say things like, provide more behavioral questions. Questions for, um, so strategy. So if there's something like you're weak on, you can kind of drill down on that, right? Um, you could also use it in other ways. So say like you were trying to, pivot into a different industry, right? You might want to, you could ask it something like, suggest relevant role based on marketing. Um, or, um, let's say rowing was your interest, and we'll say tech, right? Just to give it different things and see what comes back. So I kind of like it from the perspective of if you were trying to pivot into somewhere else, right? You can now understand where the folks who do the things that you like are. And I think it's really, really helpful, kind of in this way. Um, You could, from the standpoint of, let's go back here, you can do um, another one where you could ask it um, based and you see how fast it works. It really can save you lots of time. You could even, have given it the job description and the resume and say, based on this, write the cover letter, which will give you probably a little more nuance here. But as you can see, it'll provide a really extensive cover letter for you. But I would still suggest like, altering it, right? You want to make it a little more specific. You probably know more things about the company based on some of the research that you've done. You probably can give it an anecdotal, story about some of the success that you've had in a particular part of your career. So you want to make sure that like you are really fine tuning it based on your own skills and abilities, and you're really highlighting them in a way. This to me sort of gives you the first part of it, and not necessarily, you know, the actual document to cut, copy, paste, and move on. The other thing that you want to be mindful of is that you can go in here and you can deal with the privacies. So you can actually tell it that you don't want it to share, your information as well. So just want to give you those kind of quick ways in which you can use it because it honestly is pretty powerful. It just really depends on how you want to uh, utilize it in your search, but you can definitely do a number of different things here. You can also, of course, use it. Like I said, there's personalized coaching in the future. Virtual hiring, of course, is going to be in there. The smart match already exists, but I think it's actually getting smarter. There are opportunities too for you to ask it things for continuous learning as well. We did not go over that, but it's pretty much the same thing, right? I would like to pivot into this industry. Please let me know. What skills I might need to add based on this resume, right? Or what I could do to further enhance this particular skill. And it does come back because it's scanning the web with all kinds of things. And like I said, you'll have to really think about where that information is coming from and whether that, particular educational tool makes sense. But it is nice to kind of have a much more sort of specialized search when it comes back. There are some implications, I would think, with AI in terms of what your current role and how it might impact it as well. We might think about what tasks are routine and that maybe can be automated by AI that you may not have to do anymore. Um, I would say you want to think about that from the standpoint of where it might be going and not necessarily implement that in your day-to-day activities just yet without, of course, the acknowledgement of your employer. There could be, like I said, some skill emphasis. It could actually tell you maybe where some things are going in terms of like scanning your resume, figuring out where emotional intelligence for you lies and what you can kind of bolster in that way to keep your skills nice and fresh. Because we're automating some of our tasks, that means that there are other things like our management style and things that might be um, something that we want to pay particular attention to. So our absolute value is not diminished in any way. There could be new roles, right, that could come about. Those roles, um, could be all kinds of things. It could be explaining how to use AI. It could be implementing AI or maybe enhancing the tech that already exists. And then there could also, of course, be industry specific changes that AI might impact in the future. So as you are playing with this new tool and learning how to basically have a conversation with it, you'll, I think, uncover all kinds of ways that you might be able to utilize it that exist even outside of this process. With that, I'm going to end here and then ask if there are any questions. Can you discuss the issue of AI using me and my job search process to learn slash improve its own algorithm for their company's own financial gain slash profit or other goals? Um, so I think what you're asking here is essentially how the AI algorithm essentially is profiting from this. Um, and so from the ChatGPT or generative perspective, usually what it's happening is it's open and so it's being integrated into more apps and different platforms. We've seen a number of different organizations who've reached out to us who have implemented AI from the standpoint of the job search specifically. The platforms are just getting better, honestly, at what they're doing. And so from that standpoint, I guess they're, of course, making more money. The other thing that happens, I think, while understand that while you're using the AI for your specific job search, it's taking the information, kind of like how you're asking, what you're putting into it. All of that is being utilized if you didn't check off um, the little privacy indicator inside the system. And so everything you put into it, it's learning, right? As it goes along, they're learning. And so you want to make sure, that as you are, sharing information, if there's something sensitive, you don't really want to do that. Because that information is going to exist and then help the AI get smarter as it goes along. You may have covered this, but is there any way to address the feeling of being ghosted once you reapply to the system? Do we do we push to find a way to reach out and talk to people aside from the hiring team? A little of the core AI discussion yet happens once and we don't hear back. Yes, so I can tell you from the standpoint of feeling ghosted, employers are horrible at this. And I will admit that a lot of folks just, you're kind of applying into the system and you're feeling like, okay, there's no person, I don't see that. There are a few things that you can do and we advise you to do is you can always, of course, network with recruiters, right? The way to find them easily, of course, is to use LinkedIn, introduce yourself to the recruiter, let them know that you have applied for a specific role. And you can even attach your resume and say, you're looking forward to discussing your qualifications. If you aren't the person who is handling this particular requisition, if you wouldn't mind sharing or passing my information along, I'm really interested in speaking to someone. That's definitely the way that you can do that. You can, of course, I would say that you shouldn't be, kind of just blindly applying into the system anyway. The best path is always to network before you apply if you can. And you want to, of course, utilize the Yale Alumni Network, see if there is someone who can introduce you to the formal recommendation process. In some cases, it's you talk to that person and they have to send you a specific link to that role. And other places, it's that person has to provide your name and an email address. So it just depends. And you want to understand what that process is like. When we are in there are more people inside the employment marketplace than probably ever before, more skilled people. And so you want to make sure you are doing the things that differentiate you, and networking and getting that recommendation is definitely one of the ways that also helps you not be ghosted to some degree. Usually when you are put into the formal recommendation process, the employer assumes that the person who you has recommended you has a great reputation, and then therefore they know great people, and likely you will be ushered through that system a little easier than if you just applied. AI is making those more relevant, i.e., people may not have had to read, but if AI is screening or cover letters are more important or pre-automated screening. So I think cover letters it's always been very dependent on the company, right? Some companies love them, want you to want you to produce them, and other companies they don't. I will be fully transparent in telling you that as a recruiter, it's not the first thing I read. And so in which case now that they're like kind of implementing this AI, yes, I would think that the AI is scanning it, the AI is likely giving it a score. But all of this can't be, I think, completely, especially at this particular stage, it can't be all digital. We can't just rely on the digital or the AI to give us a correct thing because of all the bias that is kind of lends itself to. I still would think that a person is going to be the last reviewer of it regardless of what happens, and they are going to be determining whether they believe that that particular thing is original work in some ways. And I forgot to discuss this, but I'm glad you asked this question because I can bring it up now. There are actually different AI that also will scan it and tell you if AI generated it. So it's another reason why you don't want to completely just lift the whole thing and then sort of cut, copy, paste, is because they are also scanning for, has this been generated by AI? And you don't want to be amongst the people who, of course, are seen as lacking integrity in that way. And so you want to make sure that you are really taking it and using it as like a shell, and then adapting it really specifically to you. I think it's going to be okay if like you lift phrases, but whole paragraphs and those kind of things, I don't think that's going to work. So I think as it evolves, it's probably going to get more interesting as this thing gets smarter, as the technology starts to really be able to evaluate quickly. But I do think that it's going to impact it. It's just going to depend on the level of technology that the employer is implementing behind that. And employers aren't always transparent about whether they have AI, like kind of scanning your resume. They've never really disclosed this before, even though some of these technologies have existed. So I think it's going to be interesting to see where it goes. Is there any option to practice interviewing for finance type roles? Interview warm up seems to only be preset fields, although there is a general field offered. Um, I have not, I've not seen them from the standpoint of, I'll put it to you this way. We have what we call asynchronous interview platforms inside of Yale is one of the resources and those kinds of things available to students. What I have not seen from the outside are very many that are directed straight toward consumer, whereas interview warm up. The reason why it's geared toward technology is because it is a Google product, and essentially what it's doing, Google is providing a number of different technologies to help you from the standpoint of that they need talent in this specific area. I don't know of one that is strictly for finance type roles. But what I do know is that some of the questions could be similar, right? So even when we're thinking about, behavioral questions from the standpoint of, those major things like collaboration, public speaking, whatever those skills are, there are a few that overlap. And so you might find some of it relevant, but maybe not specific totally to finance roles. I think maybe the other way that you can sort of game this system, honestly, is use Zoom, record yourself, take the questions from ChatGPT that are finance related, have them in front of you and then say your answer and record that and then play it back and figure out, am I using the STAR technique? Really evaluate it from the standpoint of, have I provided enough detail? Have I gone through each one of, the components of the STAR technique? Have I done the S, the T, the A, the R? Typically people forget the R. So there are ways to sort of do that outside of this, but I don't know specific platforms that are finance related. But I'll definitely, now that you have me curious, I want to see what else is out there. Thank you so much for your participation, and we will see you soon.